all from across the state. It is May. I can't believe that we're almost to the halfway point of this year. But God is good. We have been blessed. Our chambers have been blessed. And this is our season. So we're excited to kick off another Monday morning momentum for the month of April. We're excited to have two wonderful presentations. Our first one is going to come from a great friend of TAC, Dr. Michael Adams. And then our second presentation will be about our upcoming annual conference. It's conference planning time. We are a few months out, and our dynamic duo team, Matt Houston and Kristen O'Neill, will give us a presentation about what is to come. So I hope you all are excited as I am. And I want to start first by introducing our special guest speaker, Dr. Adams. Dr. Adams is going to talk to us about engagement, political engagement in your local market. One of the things, I'm a second generation entrepreneur, and one of the things my dad always taught me is if you're in business, you're in politics. That's just the way it is. Big business, big money equals politics also too. So we want to help our chambers get engaged in your local and state affairs. As you all know, TAC is the advocacy arm for our chambers in Austin, but there are a lot of opportunities that happen in your local market. One of the things our president, Charles O'Neill, talks about a lot is all the power with Black mayors and municipalities across this state and this country. So there's a lot of power, a lot of resources, a lot of opportunities for your members, and we want to get positioned to take advantage of all of it. So Dr. Adams is going to chat with us about that, give us some tips and some things that we can do in our local markets to be engaged. So again, welcome, and it's now my honor to introduce Dr. Michael Adams, PhD. He is a political scientist who specializes in electoral politics, redistricting, and voting rights. Dr. Adams is the chair of the political science department and holds the position of director of the MPA program at the Barbara Jordan Mickey Leland School of Public Affairs at Texas Southern University. As interim chair of the political science department, Dr. Adams has pressed forward with the student-centric approach to the entire operation within the department. Alongside his duties as director, he is also professor of public affairs. Dr. Adams assumed the positions of both director and professor in 2005 after matriculating through the ranks of professorship as a dedicated member of the Texas Southern team since 1983. He currently serves as faculty consultant to the College Board of Education, testing service in Princeton, New Jersey. His expertise has led him to serve as a member of the Houston Community College Public Administration Advisory Board and as a reviewer for the American Review of Politics. Dr. Adams has also published in the Journal of Service Science, the Encyclopedia of African American History, International Journal of Education Research, and European Journal of Social Sciences. His tenure at the Texas Southern University has filled many responsibilities. He has served as interim dean of Barbara Jordan Mickey Leland School of Public Affairs, as a faculty senator, the chair of University Institutional Effectiveness Committee, as part of TSU Tomorrow Committee, the University International Studies Committee, and the Academic Grievance Committee for the School of Public Affairs. In 2008, he was honored with the Texas Southern University Research Scholar Award for the School of Public Affairs Research Scholar Award and the Q. Craig Teaching Award. So we are honored to have such a scholar with us. But most importantly, I just want to say that Dr. Adams is a friend of TAC. And has been a friend of this organization for several years. Students have participated with us. Texas Southern, under his leadership, has been a partner with us. So we're very glad to welcome you, Dr. Adams. Thank you, sir, for your time.
Right. Thank you, Courtney.
Yes, sir.
Just a couple of updates on that. On that bio, I need to update it. I'm no longer the chair of the political science department, so I have more time. And I've been involved in a number of wonderful opportunities that I think dovetail with your organization
Yes.
We are on the precipice at any moment now. I'm hoping to receive a call from the National Technology Information Administration saying that Texas Southern has gotten a $2.5 million grant to do broadband. And so we'll be doing that. And I've recently received a $100,000 grant from the Volcker Foundation. And you know, that was named after Paul Volcker. He has this money that he's given away to do public service or service learning. And I think that's something that once this grant has already been received and we're in the building phases of that now. So I'll be reaching out to members of TAC to providing some service learning opportunities for our students. So those are the updates. Now, I don't know if Courtney told you all, I was scheduled last week and I'm feeling somewhat like the Texas grid this morning. I had more power on last Monday than I did today. But I would like to make a couple of observations because I'm a political scientist by training and politics is what I do. But I think Courtney is right in her introduction. If you're going to talk about involvement, and I know that this is an audience, it's not a classroom, and you guys are practitioners, and you have to be at the point where the decisions are made and where opportunities are there. I think we've seen a lot. And I want to reflect on some of the things that I will label as disruption within our economy, and also looking at some trends in terms of in the state of Texas and where we may be going. And then lastly, I want to talk about politics because I think it's always important to us as people of color or as Black people, when we see this ugliness out there in terms of what should be taught in the public schools, and we see the tragedy of Buffalo, New York over the weekend. I don't think, as my grandfather used to say, he said that we're sleeping in dangerous times. Well, I like to say that we're living in dangerous times, and they are no different from the time that we came here as chattel slaves more than 400 years ago. So after I talk a minute or two about what I call regulating big tech and stabilizing Houston neighborhoods, I will make some comments about some generic things in terms of I think your organization should be apprised of. And the agenda, just in case, to make sure that I stay on course, I would like to focus on the key areas. And when I woke up this morning, I thought about when we talk about disruption, think about this for a minute. We have Airbnb. They don't own a room, don't own a home anywhere in the United States of America, but they're the leader in terms of rental spaces and what have you. So just think about that. Uber and Lyft do not own a vehicle, but they are the leaders in terms of transportation and ride sharing. And certainly we've seen that cab companies, as we know them throughout the United States of America and throughout the world, have come to grips in having to make deals with these organizations. So if you're like me, that will signal that business is different now. There are disruptions now. And I know that I grew up like many of you, living with these folk wisdoms, like the early bird catches the worm, these things you have to do. But ask yourself, is that necessarily true today as we consider the business environment? Is it better to be strategic and to look at things? It's just like poker. Let somebody else make another move and then you follow. So as entrepreneurs, I think you have to understand the disrupting economy and the conditions that we live in. And the other point that I would like to make, I live in Houston, Harris County, and I have a county commissioner, his name is Rodney Ellis. And Rodney, and one of the things in terms of politics, I'm from the school. I don't believe that people should be in politics just for the glory of it or for the individual prestige. You have to be there and you have to have a kind of altruistic reason. You go there to make fundamental changes. And you don't go there just to be on TV and say, hey, I'm this or that. But you want to make meaningful changes in individuals' lives. So what am I getting at here? I think something that Rodney has done, and I know your organization should be a product of, is these disparity studies in terms of looking at county government and all government and public organizations. Look at who they're doing business with. And we know that some of the findings of those studies, it's almost embarrassing when it's less than almost 5% in some places, have never lettered a contract to people of color or Blacks. So as entrepreneurs, I tell my students all the time that government is the largest employer in the United States of America. And so as entrepreneurs, you want to be there. You want to ferret out these contracts. Don't be don't be knocked out of the game to say, well, hey, I don't have the opportunity to do this, or I don't think I can participate. There are people out there just like me, and I'm not making a sales pitch, but there are people who can help you with your proposal. I know that Courtney and Charles are both, Courtney is good at this in terms of Fort Bend County. She sends us things out in terms of requests for proposals. I think we need to be more active in terms of the business side. Now, my second thing, I think we need to look at the data. And I will challenge you guys, and this is something that I would love to do with this organization. I think that the Texas Black Chamber need to have what we call a data summit. It could be a state data summit. We could host it at Texas Southern University. Looking at the data, what does it say in terms of type of products that people are buying, how they are buying it, whether it's online? Look at the percentage of Black people, and Black people are there. And so I think if we were to do this, is to have a kind of data metric and to talk about the population. The second part of that call that I would put out to the Texas Black Chamber is to join me as we prepare for the 2030 census. I would love to partner with organizations, say that let's count people of color, because the census determines everything. And I will talk later about the politics of redistricting and how the numbers in terms of the population changes occurred. And so that's important. So let's look at the last 10 years. Let's talk about how the population has grown. And you know that as a result of the 2020 census, we were told that 90% of the population growth took place amongst people of colors or in their community. But you would know that when it comes to politics, because we saw redistricting and gerrymandering in the Texas state legislature. Also, we have to look at the type of industries that are coming into the state of Texas. And if you see what we see there, the Silicon Valley is being developed and built around Austin, Texas. What are the opportunities there for people of color? I also do artificial intelligence in terms of public administration. As I teach my students, we have to be prepared for the future. There's something called smart cities now. You can go over a bump in the road in terms of a pothole, for example. There are places like in Boston, Massachusetts, they have what they call a bump app, for example. They know in real time where that pothole is, and then they can dispatch the public workforces to fill these kinds of things. So artificial intelligence is a part of that. You all should also embrace that in terms of AI and how it is transforming the business world as well. And so the problem that I see in terms of AI, and also for entrepreneurs like you all, that you guys should be there at the table with Elon Musk if he's coming into the state of Texas, if he's coming into the city of Austin, if he's coming into the city of Houston or Dallas or San Antonio. Well, if you guys are going to make these assessments and concessions in terms of tax abatement, I think we need to demand to make sure that you guys are at the table and there's a percentage of minority participation and participation in whatever Elon Musk or whatever all of these people, whether it's Bezos or whoever is coming in, you need to be at the table and position yourselves for these wonderful opportunities, because business as we know it has been disrupted and we need to be a part of the change. So I'm going to stop there. I don't know, Courtney, if you want to have the Q&A. I hadn't gotten to the political part, but you don't want to have to talk to me because I'm a professor and I'll go on the politics of it because that's my bailiwick, so to speak. But I can make some generic comments in terms of the history where we are, and then I'll close, and you may have some questions. But in terms of the politics, where we are today, I think we need to reflect briefly upon our history in terms of how we came to be in this place that we know as America. And there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of backlash about the 1619 Project. And we know that that's a project by a former New York Times a writer who suggested that the first landing of African Americans certainly occurred off the coast of the Carolinas in 1619. And what was the conditions of African Americans? And you know, it took up until what we call the Revolutionary War, when the United States of America broke with Great Britain, but still African Americans were in chattel slavery. And that was, we were commodities. We were something to be bought and sold. And we had the Civil War, the war between the states. And many people will argue that that war was about the economy. We had an industrializing North. We still had an agrarian South that was still wedded to the institution, the peculiar institution that we call slavery. And we know that certainly we had the Civil War, 1865. We see the ending of this war, and we'll be celebrating Juneteenth and what that means to Black people. But still, the status of African Americans in the United States of America had to be addressed. It wasn't answered when we saw the US Constitution, because in the Constitution, there were provisions there called the chattel slave clause, for example. If you were a runaway, you had to be returned. Also, we were not counted as whole people. This was in the Constitution of the United States. Only 2/3 of the population were counted to determine the proportion in the US Congress of America. And that was a concession to those southern states. Now, and after the Civil War, we get the Civil War amendments. And those amendments are collectively the 13th Amendment, which was necessary to abolish slavery. The 14th Amendment was necessary to bestow citizenship rights upon Black Americans, because there was a US Supreme Court case where the Chief Justice said that Black people were not citizens of the United States of America and they had no rights. That was the Dred Scott decision that white people were deemed to respect. So the Constitution had to be amended after war, the 14th Amendment, to make African Americans citizens of these United States. And the 15th Amendment was there to bestow voting rights upon African American men. And you should know that women did not get the right to vote until 1919, circa 1920, with the 19th Amendment. Now, what happened after the Civil War, and why we have this hue and cry in terms of Senate Bill 1, redistricting, and why we're dealing with voter suppression today? Well, after the Civil War, you should know, I grew up in Mississippi, that Mississippi has more state representatives after the Civil War. They had 2 members of Congress. A state senator, for example, was elected during the Reconstruction period. Whites in the South, they didn't like this. We also had large numbers of Black people elected to state legislative bodies in states such as South Carolina, Louisiana, in the cradle of the Civil War. So what did they do? Well, a president by the name of Rutherford B. Hayes, he made a concession to the South. In an effort, he wanted to be president of the United States of America so badly, he reached out to the South and told them if they were to give them their electoral votes, he would withdraw the troops from the South. And with the withdrawal of the troops, the federal troops that were deputized to monitor the conditions in the aftermath of the Civil War and to protect the freedmen, Black people, well, when this happened, they started to discriminate all over again. And the state of Mississippi took the lead. In 1819, they called a constitutional convention for the express purpose of denying and disenfranchising Black men from voting. How did they do this? They enshrined in their constitution what we call literacy clause, test of these types of things. Also, you had a grandfather clause. With the literacy test, for example, you had to read a portion of the Constitution. And we know with the history of slavery, we had large numbers of Blacks who were illiterate. They couldn't read. So this disqualified a lot of people. And then if you went to Harvard, for example, and then you could interpret the Constitution, and then the test that they imposed was so subjective, they would ask you how many bubbles were in a bar of soap, for example. And one lady said more than 100. She still failed the literacy test. So it became very difficult for African Americans to register to vote and participate after the Civil War at the end of Reconstruction. How did we do it in Texas? Texas pioneered by using what we call the white primary in the Democratic Party. There was only one party, because the Republican Party, you have to remember, that was the party of Abraham Lincoln. So with one partyism, if you denied Black people from voting in the primary, you nullified or you took away their right to vote, to participate in the electoral process. That didn't end until 1944, when Lonnie Smith sued as a part of the NAACP in a case called Smith versus Allwright, where the US Supreme Court ended the Democratic Party white primary. And now you had, where Courtney resided in Fort Bend County, they came up with the Jaybird primary, because they had the Jaybird political party and said, well, hey, we're gonna have a pre-primary before, if they're gonna allow Blacks to participate in the primary now. So they would get together in caucus and they would have their one candidate, and they would go in